Hey everybody, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we look back in the previous week in football and or soccer and tackle the things that we thought were interesting. I'm Tom Rennie, alongside me is MLS legend, top broadcaster, walking advert for the powers of Botox. It is Brian Dunny Dunseth. Hello mate, how's your incredible forehead?
You know, our good friend Joe Cummings, who lives not too far from you over in England, called me specifically to let me know that you busting my sorry, Tim, about having Botox is pretty epic. And he's like, were you like trying to insinuate or prove to the camera that you do not have Botox right now? And I was like, no, you can move my eyebrows. You can see my forehead scrunch. But yeah, I'm doing good, Rennie. Good to be back with you after a gluttonous Thanksgiving weekend out here in Salt Lake City, Utah.
So give us some highlights of your Thanksgiving weekend, because there's loads of things I don't get about America, obviously. But one of the main things I don't get about it is that you have Thanksgiving and then literally 4 weeks later, you do the exact same thing again with the rest of the Christian world or whatever and do Christmas. Christmas for me, I'm not a big Christmas person, but I can do the day because I don't see, well, obviously. All of it.
Nobody saw that. No one saw
that coming. No one saw it coming. But I'll do the day. I'll pretend to like people for a few hours to have a vegetarian fucking nut roast. Sorry, Tim. But then I haven't got to do it again next month. Like I can do a full year without my aunt after this. How do you do it, Dunny?
Well, we just do it as a family. We just do it as us. So
yeah, sounds awful.
No, it's great, man. We Jade, my wife is incredible. She did everything from scratch outside of the turkey. And yeah, listen, she's extraordinarily talented in the kitchen. So she spent the day before prepping and executing, and then day of hanging out all day. And we were all as a family chopping, cooking, baking, doing everything we could. And then right around 5 o'clock, dinner was served. And it was, I'll tell you what, had a few bites too many. Didn't feel great about myself. Team Back Fat won the day. And ultimately, I ended my night with a nice little whiskey, top it off. But no, everything was good out here, man. Having fun, and not short turnaround time for Christmas. But we will not be in Salt Lake for Christmas. We're getting out of the country. We're taking the kids out for kind of value experience over things. The idea of giving them more of a travel experience as opposed to just a bunch of stuff inside boxes and wrapping and all those things. So we're going to head down to Cabo San Lucas for a couple of days and enjoy Christmas and New Year's down there, and nice little beach time, nice little warm weather.
Beautiful. I'm trying to convince my wife to tell her sister to give our kids cash for Christmas. The kids won't appreciate cash. No, but I'll just wrap up some I've got in the house, give it to them. Sorry, Tim. And I'll have cash, which I value. Anyway, I'm failing in that argument. And speaking of failing, there's a professional segue. Let's talk about Manchester City because there's two big topics today. I want to talk about MLS Conference Finals and the Riqui Puig story, which is amazing. It's very Bert Troutman, which is a deep cut reference, which we'll get to. And the other one is the Man City thing. I want to see what you think about it, Dunny, but I want to lay out a little bit on Man City first, because I worked on the Tottenham game, as you know, as we spoke about last week. And I worked on this game this weekend. And it was evident last weekend, we spoke about it on the podcast, that the Rodri-lessness in midfield was evident in key moments in the game, from the Guardiola pass in midfield, where there was no one sweeping it up, from the no one doing the Rodri foul in midfield on Kulusevski, which led to the Porro goal. And then the Grealish one into midfield. Rodri is there, I'm sure, to help out and kind of bail them out of this scenario. But watching the game against Liverpool this week, and I've only seen the highlights of the Champions League game midweek, so I don't know if that works into the theory, but I couldn't believe that the midfield had Ilkay Gundogan and Rico Lewis in it again after the failures of last week. Chris Perry and I did both games. We're a bit like, okay. I mean, Bernardo Silva played a bit further forward than he did previously, but even so, it didn't work as a pairing. And then we started to realize, but that's all they've got. There's no other option. And that's kind of what threw us a little bit. Like we all knew, right? We don't need to be, as good at analyzing football as you to know that Rodri being missing was going to be a problem. But usually when things happen, like building a house, there's multiple load-bearing walls. And, just as a bit of personal experience, if you do want to build an extension out the back and you want to knock through the kitchen, make sure it's not a load-bearing wall, okay? That's what your survey is for. Don't just do it yourself. Just, spoiler alert. But usually there's a second load-bearing wall, or you have to put something in to kind of hold the ceiling up. It's almost like they've taken Rodri away. and there was no other load-bearing walls because
Mm.
Rodri was doing so much for this team. And you're sort of looking around thinking, who's going to take on Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai in midfield? And it's Ilkay Gundogan, Rico Lewis, and Bernardo Silva.
Mm.
That's a bad matchup. And I just
Yeah.
sort of wonder what you thought about Guardiola choosing that group and where they go from here, because all this six Jose Mourinho stuff, Mourinho was doing that on the way out. He
Yeah.
wasn't doing that on the way up.
Yeah, it's a good shout throwing Mateus Nunes into that conversation as well. Listen, I when I saw the lineup, I was only surprised because history tells us that Nathan Ake and more recently Akanji can play in that pivot six and play in that destroyer role. We know John Stones, but obviously John Stones is unreliable because of the injury concerns that he's had over the years. But there's always been a tweak and an adjustment, whether that's the the left outside backs pushing into the central midfield spot in possession, or Kyle Walker doing it on the opposite side. But again, I mean, there were options. The reality is, just looking at this, you made two big decisions, right? You drop Vardiol, you drop Ederson. And when you're giving up a clip of goals the way you are now, minimal mistakes become massive mistakes. And when you look behind me, here we go again. We saw that against Feyenoord. We thought Feyenoord was a game 3-0, 60 minutes remaining, that this is the game that gets them back on track. And we say, okay, that was a blip. It was a big blip, but it was a blip that now is past. Let's get focused for Liverpool. But the fact that it ends 3-3, I think, just compounds the pressure. Now, the banter itself, I don't have a problem with it. I thought it was pretty amazing. I know Pep tried to kind of, I guess, upplay what the banter was, and trying to say, well, I never expected it here at Anfield, trying to invoke this holier than thou spiritual element out of the Liverpool fans, which is never going to happen. But to do the six the first time, okay. I didn't understand why he did the six in front of his own fans, the traveling supporters. It was almost like, trust me, I got this. Don't worry. Don't forget what I've done for you. But you're right. I mean, listen, the reality is what? Coming off the bench, Grealish, De Bruyne, Savinho, Doku. The reality is we don't know what's happening. We don't know if there's been a kerfuffle. We don't know if feelings have been hurt in some of these post-match, screaming fits that managers and coaches have. We don't know the dynamics between players getting called out, the egotistical standard that comes in with like, hold on, bro, fuck you. That's his fault. Sorry, Tim, not my fault. Like those type of things do happen. And sometimes lines are crossed and feelings get hurt. And you also find yourself in moments where you're watching in real time, power being challenged. So these could all be true. We could talk about form. We could talk about injury. We could talk about load management. We could talk about, managing the expectations of these players. We could talk about even the manipulation psychology of, saying, hold on, Jack Grealish, for £100 million, it's been a long time since we've seen goals and assists coming out of you, and now we're now the speculation about flops, for as much as we talk about Erling Haaland and the goals that he scores and who he scores those goals against. It's kind of the Romelu Lukaku conversation about now scoring big goals against big teams. Does that really happen? Jack Grealish is coming on under fire now for the lack of statistical influence. Even Phil Foden, how many times is he being knocked in the ground in moments where you think he'd be better in possession? So yeah, all of these things in actuality can be true, and we could still be clutching at straws trying to figure out what the right answer is. Because if there's anybody that knows the right answer, it's Pep Guardiola. And obviously right now, he's not striking the right tune with this group.
What happens over the next 3 to 5 games? They've got Nottingham Forest on the Wednesday, which is tough. Forest have been good, and it's away from home, which suits Nottingham Forest. City at home, and then Palace, which is usually a tough game, weirdly, for City, even though that they tend to come through it. But they've had tough times at Selhurst Park in recent years. I mean, where does this end? What's got to happen over the Christmas period? They've still got a couple of Champions League games to go as well. There's the Carabao, there's the FA, there's Carabao. Forgive me, they're out of that one, but there's the FA Cup coming up in January. Like there's maybe 9 games to go until we get to the end of January.
Yeah.
What's the pathway out of it? And when we get to January, are we going to see some Man City spending? Because it's worth noting the wages are massive, but the transfer fees haven't been, and it's only Savinho that came in during the summer.
Yeah.
And surely, I mean, even the clubs lower down the table will be going, we need to get someone in that role. Without Rodri, that they're going to win nothing, are they?
Well, you brought up Forest and Palace, but after that, it's away against Juve. It's home against Man United. It's away against Villa. So these become really interesting and tricky tests because history tells us that you're right. Forest and Palace should be 6 points, although there's no God-given right in the form that they find themselves in right now. And then going away against Juve is going to become very fascinating because of their need to make sure that they get points and can I guess avoid the new format, which is effectively another play-in game to make it to the next round, and then have the Manchester Derby on the backside. Um, yeah, listen, I'm at a loss for words. I think we all are at a loss for words. Now, I think it's maniacal the high line that they continue to play with how loose they are defensively. I can't for the life of me understand why, with no pressure on the ball, they're within 5 yards of the center half in the center circle with players running from deep lying spots. I mean, whether it's Feyenoord or it's Liverpool, how many times do we see vulnerability in possession, quick turnover, ball up over the top, lack of speed, lack of transition moment defensively, and then 1v1s with goalkeepers? So, as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, well, maybe that's the reason why Ederson got dropped, because against Feyenoord, was there a real reason for him to come flying off his line and concede that goal to make it 3-3? Now, there's a bunch of other trickle down things that happened for that goal to be scored, which was an extraordinary goal. But again, we keep coming back to what this team is, what this team isn't. Pep keeps trying to tell us that the health of this squad is getting better, which inevitably means that more high profile players on the field and more dynamic moments. That being said, you obviously have to make a decision in January. And it's a team that for me, as a Manchester United fan, one thing I will always give City credit for is they've always identified their targets. They've got their targets done early, and then they've included them as quickly into Pep's system as possible. Now, can they do that in the January window? Would they've come up with surprises in the past? Obviously, they need a really dynamic defensive six that can play this position. And maybe it's time for them to go all in on the heir apparent to Rodri, because, since he came in, we've seen a couple of players come and go that have been players that are good enough to play for Man City, but aren't better than Rodri. So maybe it's time now to go find a player that is comparable to Rodri, which means you're probably in the $70 to $90 million range in a January transfer window, when you still have the shadow of 115 charges somewhat looming over the club.
I want to get to that because Arne Slot, King of the Boards comments are very funny today. So I do want to see what you think about that. But one final bit on City. Speculate with me. Walk down this path with me and try and find an answer for me. So if this was our pal Juan Lopetegui, he'd be sacked for this run of form.
Yep.
Obviously, the answer is credit in the bank. So, we'll try and sidestep that because the answer's sort of obvious. But it's 4 consecutive Premier League matches lost for the first time since 2008. This has never happened to Pep Guardiola during his managerial career. There's 7 games in all competitions without a win. What would it take for Pep Guardiola to be sacked? Like, realistically, is there any chance it would happen, or what do you think?
I just can't see a world in which he's sacked. I could see him walking away. I think from a pride perspective and understanding what he's done. But I think, with the announcement, less than 3 weeks ago, that he'd re-upped his deal with an option, that kind of, and this was in the beginning of the losing streak, that this was kind of like, we still believe in him and he's the right guy. And there's not a shadow of doubt anywhere within the club or around this group that we need to make a different decision. But again, there comes a point where it's easier to sack the manager than to change the players. That being said, as I look at this roster and I look at these players, you're talking about what? You've got questions about De Bruyne long term. You have to have questions about Grealish at this point. You're going to have questions about Silva because he's been linked with Barcelona for the past 3 years. Gundogan just came back, which is a good Band-Aid considering the Rodri situation. From a center back perspective, how much longer can you talk about John Stones being an elite center back? And how much more do you want to deal with the inability to trust him in critical moments, even though you do have depth in Diaz, Akanji, Ake, and Vardiol? Kyle Walker doesn't look like the Kyle Walker that he's been this season, there's something different where he's getting outrun for pace. The desire not to cross the ball in critical moments and keep possession seems like an odd situation. And even going back to the beginning of the year with Ederson and having to feel the conversation surrounding a potential exit, but then coming out publicly and saying how important he is, and then dropping him after what happened against Feyenoord. It just seems like it's nowhere near what it was as a Manchester United fan from, a David Gill and Sir Alex Ferguson departure. But it does feel as though there's a critical moment coming up where Man City has to figure out what the next version looks like without having the massive influence of a guy like Kevin De Bruyne pulling the strings. Because when he's on the field, you can tell what a difference maker he is. When he's not there, City is still City, but they're not as dynamic as the normal City with De Bruyne in it.
I mean, the only other element to this, easy for me to say, it's been a long day, is that I wonder, in terms of the players, whether him signing the new contract is actually doing the opposite of what they'd hoped it would do. Because there are some players that have left Manchester City and they have specifically cited not being able to work with Pep Guardiola anymore. That's happened at Bayern, that's happened at Barca, and that's not a case of there being a personal fallout, though I'm sure that's happened. It happens in any workplace. But like the intensity, the drama, I know for a fact if he was my boss, I'd love to win things, but he would piss me off with the scratching and the histrionics. And he's not my sort of person. I couldn't deal with it. Maybe a sorry Tim in there. But like it would, after a while, 2 or 3 years of it, I'd be like, do I have to go and see this jerk for another year, another day? And there might be some people in this group that thought it's the final year. We're going to get a new voice. We're going to get something new.
Yeah.
And now they're not. And now they're suddenly thinking, well, maybe it is time for me to step out of this. And that could work for everybody. But that might lead to City just looking so gassed during that game at Anfield. Very tough game. But you could also say it about the Spurs game and bits of the Feyenoord match as well. The last element of this before we move on is the Mo Salah of it. We won't do too much on Liverpool this week. They've been fantastic. We've covered that in previous shows. I'm sure we'll do it again. But Arne Slot, king of the balls, right? Mo Salah, big story. He is leaking to the media all over the place about his unhappiness. And he had a quote at the end of this game saying, it's probably the last time I play against Man City at home, so I just went out to enjoy it, or words to that effect. Arne Slot gave his pre-Man United press conference. And he said this. Was it Man United? No, they've got someone else. Anyway, whatever. Midweek Newcastle. Thank you. It's Arsenal, Man United. And he said this, quote, maybe Mo knows more about the 115 accusations that are done, so he expects them not to be in the Premier League next season. I do expect them to be in the Premier League. The boring answer is always the same. This is not the place for me to talk about Mo's contract. Maybe I've already said too much about the joke I've just made. So that will probably get the headlines. It was a joke. It was a joke. I repeat, it was a joke. Now, I'm sure, Dunny, you've experienced this as I have over the years, but there's sometimes you're at a party or a gathering and you're just having a bit of fun, you're yucking it up, and then you might suddenly realize, oh, someone's nan is here, or like the wife of the buddy I was taking the piss out of is here, or whatever, that sort of scenario. Or you say something and you're a bit like, oh, that might have been a bit far, that one, actually. I was joking. When you have to start saying, I was joking, please, no, I was joking, it's just a joke, let it go, you kind of f***ed it already. Sorry, Tim. People in the room, I think, started to laugh, and they were a bit like, yes, headlines, we've got him, he's done himself. What did you make to this? I'm always keen for a bit of a joke, and I'm happy to take it as such, but also, it's going to spin, this one. What did you make to it?
Listen, I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't actually have a problem with Mo's post-match standing with Virgil van Dijk. I watched it live, and I thought the interviewer picked the perfect time because, the game midweek, when you smash Real Madrid, there's a feel-good factor, right? But for Mo Salah, you're usually not going to get him unless it's a man-of-the-match performance interview. Yeah. So to get him in that moment on the backside of him doing his impromptu press conference about how unhappy he was about the negotiation or the lack thereof or the tactics or however we're trying to verbalize what's happening between him and Liverpool, I thought it was a genius move because it's a reference point of the importance of the game, a reference point of the importance of the rivalry, and then an important reference point of the current status is that Mo Salah has a chance to again verbalize the unhappiness of where he's at, but also the nostalgia of what this game could mean. Because when he puts in that type of performance, again, it's for the record books. And again, I struggle to comprehend the sticking point in this conversation between his representatives in Liverpool. Is it weekly wages or is it the years? Is it guaranteed years or is it a guaranteed 3 that he wants versus a 2+1 option? Is his wages what they're $350 a week? Does he want more based on what he's doing? If you do let him walk for free, how much money are you leaving on the table? On top of that, how much is it going to cost you to find a player, even if I don't know if you possibly can, that's capable of being the performer on consistent basis that Mo Salah is week in, week out. So I'm dumbfounded by the situation. I'm dumbfounded that it's in the public eye. I'm dumbfounded that it's not just him, it's Virgil van Dijk and Trent Alexander-Arnold, because even the interviewer after that answer from Mo turned to Virgil van Dijk and said, "I'm not going to ask you about your situation, even though it's similar," something to that effect, which drew a Dutch little giggle out of Virgil van Dijk. So Arne Slot has done an incredible job of, I think, managing the lightheartedness and the playfulness from a Dutch perspective, from the Liverpool manager perspective, that right now, because they're winning, is very easy to do. It's very like Big Ange Postecoglou in the early part of the season for Tottenham last year. Now, let's see if there's more significant hiccups. Let's see if there becomes more significant headaches with these 3 players verbally letting everybody else know how effing pissed they are from the new infrastructure at Liverpool and ownership, and then what that looks like. Because right now, you can get away with it, but it's not until that "don't question my integrity, mate," or "oh, I know the problem, mate," that's when things get a little bit more tough. "Can I answer your question or you just going to repeat yourself?" Like those type of things where all of a sudden Big Ange becomes way more bristly than we ever had seen publicly before.
Your Australian accent is really coming on. That was up there with the Brendan Rodgers. That was spectacular. And just for reference, we don't do the Jamaican one. Anyway, look, more things to come. I want to get back to it was good, but unbroadcastable. Listen, I want to get back to Premier League later. I want to ask you about Arsenal and Chelsea. We did cut that. We might cut this. We're never going to play it. Did it even happen? Is it just a joke? You'll never know. Did we just break the 4th wall?
Fuck off, Tim. Sorry.
Before we get into a bit of MLS Cup Final coming up this weekend, of course, we'll be out in LA. Some light housekeeping. If you're watching the program on YouTube, lovely to see you. We are also available for you as a podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, search for Week in the Tackle and you can find us. That's Apple, that's Spotify, that's all the little weird ones that I don't know here, but they do exist and someone's listening on it, like Billy Bob's podcast forum. So subscribe. Also, tell your friends to subscribe. And one of the best things to do for this podcast is to tell someone how much you enjoyed it and how much they would enjoy it. Your friends, for some reason, trust you. So tell them how much you enjoyed the program. And also, they shouldn't trust you. Sneak around their house, get their phone, get their pad, get their laptop, get their TV, subscribe on their behalf. In many ways, you're doing them a kindness. Leave us a 5-star review. We love 5-star reviews. And if you can write a review, please do that as well. Let's talk about injuries. What do you know about Bert Troutman?
Not a lot. I mean, it sounds familiar.
Bert Troutman was a Manchester City goalkeeper who was named the Football Writers' Footballer of the Year in 1956. But he entered football folklore that year because he played in the FA Cup Final between Manchester City and Birmingham City. There was a challenge during the game between Bert Troutman, the goalkeeper, German goalkeeper, and the Birmingham City player, Peter Murphy. What happened is Troutman broke several vertebrae in his neck when he dived to stop Murphy with 17 minutes left in the game. He played on for the rest of the FA Cup Final, made several crucial saves as Man City went on to win by 3-1. He played on with a broken neck for 17 minutes, and there's some great shots, black and white shots of him going to lift the FA Cup because he used to line up and then go lift it. Now you've got to wait on the balcony like a tit until everyone's up there and you lift the trophy. So Sorry, Tim, I guess.
No, no.
No,
Can you
no,
please explain to me what the origination of calling someone a tit is?
like a boob, like a
Yeah.
tit, like a wally. That's it. It's just like instead of saying boob, you used to say tit. Same reason, like a
So,
boobish behavior, I guess.
oh,
Um,
I'm
boob,
definitely calling you a tit to my kids from now on.
do it
Tom
like a
Rennie,
tit.
the tit.
What a tit.
Got
He's
to
a
go do the
tit.
podcast with Rennie. You know, that tit.
He's a tit, that geezer. Anyway, and he goes up and he lifts the trophy and he's visibly got a wonky neck. So he played on with a broken neck. It's a legendary story. We'll be doing that about Riqui Puig now, won't we?
Mhm.
Of LA Galaxy, who I watched this game, the Galaxy 1-0 victory over Seattle Sounders, because in the conference semi in the West, it was a goal fest. And I thought, oh, I'll watch Galaxy because they beat some goals. Classic final in many ways.
Yeah.
In the end, it was quite tight. There wasn't many chances. A real lack of firmness in like everyone shooting. Every shot was like a little P roller on the grass, apart from the Joveljic winner in the 85th. But
Yeah.
he's set up by a lovely sliding pass by Riqui Puig before the strike goes in. Hadn't really realised that story wasn't moving particularly freely, but
Yeah.
he looked like it might be just a little knock or something. Dunny's ACL
Yeah.
during the game.
57th minute. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about this because, I haven't played and I've had injuries, of course, but like when I get an injury, I tend to like call my mum for help and then like lay down for a few weeks. I don't play on for an hour in like the
Yeah.
biggest game of the season
Yeah.
and have an impact in the game. So tell us a bit about Riqui Puig's performance, the ACL injury, and how he was able to play on, considering I thought ACL was one of those, I'm down, I'm out, I'll see you in 6 months.
Yeah, listen, I don't know because I've never done my ACL. I've only done meniscus, and the throbbing associated with that is a disaster. But you can still play through it. I was talking to Tony Mioli over on Counterattack yesterday on Monday, and he had done his ACL, and we were laughing because he said something like, "When I did my ACL, I could barely get up, much less think about running." So you have the partial tears, you have the complete tears, right? You have the ruptures. I don't know what his pain tolerance is, but it's got to be extraordinary. I've played with guys that a guy named Diego Serna down in Miami Fusion had torn both ACLs, never got surgery, just strengthened the muscles and everything around his knee, and still played without ACLs. And he was an animal, he was bull in a china shop. Ray Hudson, it was Ray Hudson was our coach. But I don't know. I can't comprehend what he was feeling, right? And if it was so unstable that it was torn, which officially they announced it the following morning, how he was able to run, like to know something, because you could see him in a couple moments. He was picking his knee up and trying to like kick it out, like he was trying to like pop it back in. So I was wondering if he had like a capsule thing, if he had like a little bit of a like his knee got jogged up a little bit somewhere in a tackle or something. But yeah, I mean, he, and by the way, for those out there that are listening that have kind of bought into this whole thing, Christian Roldan did him. It was a non-contact injury. He just did it by himself, just for some clarity. But the influence still, it's his plant foot, right? He's dominant right foot. Statistically leads almost every single category of impact players and number 10s in Major League Soccer. He's extraordinarily talented. The system, there's a freedom, there's a craziness in the freedom within the structure that's been set by Greg Vanney for the way this team plays. And I don't think there's a like for like, to be quite honest, for the LA Galaxy. And if there was ever a time where the New York Red Bulls already don't have any pressure of expectation at this point of their season in being in an MLS Cup final, and two OGs, New York, New Jersey Metro Stars, LA Galaxy, heavyweights. These two teams actually played in LA, albeit the Rose Bowl. I was in the stadium 1996. It was the first game, the first MLS game for both of these teams. And actually, Tony Miola was in goal for the Metro Stars that day. Shout out to Kenny Hess and Danny Barber, Cal State Fullerton alumni. I go OG way back because I was in the stadium watching that game. But listen, I think very quietly, the biggest acquisition of this season isn't Gabriel Peck, who did an amazing job dealing with. He was completely isolated out of the game. Wasn't Joseph Paintsel from the Ghanaian international. It's actually going to be Marco Royce. Marco Royce very quietly comes in the summer, makes everyone around him better by all accounts, we talked to Greg Vanny, we talked to Will Kuntz. Shout out to Will Kuntz. The job he's done since coming over from LAFC has put and catapulted LA Galaxy back into the limelight, which is always great for Major League Soccer to have the Galaxy in competing for the top spot in the West, competing for an MLS Cup trophy. Will Kuntz has done an amazing job building this roster, and Phil Anschutz, the owner of the Galaxy, has spent monopoly money, upwards of 25 million just this year on this group of players. So they are the favorites. I think Marco Reus very quietly becomes a really important piece, that much more. Marky Delgado is probably going to come back into the starting 11. It's either going to be him or Diego Fagundes that'll have the replacement with Edwin Cerrillo playing as kind of more of a deep lying. But there is no replacement. I mean, the craziest part is Riqui Puig does what Lionel Messi does. He matches that level and that vision, that passing acumen, the technical ability, but he does it in a much more active fashion. And that is a huge, huge loss for LA Galaxy this week. And it will be down there for SiriusXM. Keith Costigan will be on the call.
Who?
Keith Costigan, say it the third time. Tony Miola, myself. I think Marcos is heading down. Pete's going down. Thank God I don't have to deal with that Tim Horsey guy anymore. But I'm going to miss you guys. I'm going to miss our 8 a.m. call times to do a live radio show completely hammered.
We may well be back together again in Austin in the summer. We'll see how it goes. I mean, not anyone asked me. No one asked me to come to this, but I'm also far too busy this week.
There's a whisper.
Busiest time of the year.
There's a whisper.
What?
The whisper is that Tio Max Bretos is going to be with us down in Austin for the All-Star game.
Here we go. Let's go to a rodeo. Let's ride something. Let's ride something. And
you better get ready for some meat.
Veggie barbecue. No, I'm not going to eat meat. I don't eat murder.
We got you are in like one of the most iconic places for barbecue. We're gonna have to figure this out.
I'll eat the sauce and have bread, but like this is like try being a vegetarian in Ohio. Sorry, Tim. Never mind, Texas. I was walking around the airport like there was 4 options and it was all meat.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm here for 6 hours. Can I have something to eat? And all there was like a vending machine outside, and there was like cold haricot beans in a box for like $15. I mean,
how are they?
Gross. Your country's got problems, man. I ate crisps as well. Chips. Listen, before we get to the other side of things, I want to see what you think about Red Balls, and I think that's quite an interesting story. And also, go back to Metro Stars. That's a great, proper American name.
You know what I was saying? They should bring back the Metro Stars logo and the LA Galaxy logo, and then create like the old school vibe around it. And
they've done the Galaxy kit, haven't they? The old Galaxy kit, the retro one, half black, half green. They brought that back. Did they have one for Red Balls? The Metro Stars.
I mean, they kind of did.
Jersey, didn't they?
Yeah, well, so the Metro Stars was the red and black stripes going north to south, and I just think that's always like. I mean, again, I know there'd be some commercial confusion, if you will, for kind of the newer fans that'll be like, hey, hold on a second, what's this Metro Star stuff? I only know these guys as the Red Bulls. And Galaxy are still the Galaxy. It's just an updated version of the logo. But I think you got to pay homage when you have that opportunity, and especially for this to be 2024 MLS Cup Final in Los Angeles that mimics what the opening game was in 1996. Maybe it's crazy, but I think those puppies would sell. But
yeah,
again, what the hell do
you can do both. You can do both. You can embrace the past and look to the future. It's doable. Listen, before we get to that, I did want to ask you a kind of Pan-American question because it interests me. So I wondered if you could answer it. Like I kind of have it from speaking to a lot of Americans that sort of aren't sort of this group, that there's the coast and there's the middle bit. Yeah. And this came up a lot during the baseball recently when it was the Dodgers against the Yankees in the World Series, or as we think of it, the American Series. And it was like, isn't it great to have this? But I sort of thought it like the middle of the country might get pissed off by that. Oh, coastal elites. Like, I think as an outsider, it's great to have LA against New York. Do football fans in America that aren't from the coast, like you don't live on the coast, right?
Yeah.
Do people have the hump about that sort of element of it? Would they rather have it been a Sporting Kansas City or whatever, or Real Salt Lake?
I mean, the reality, the only real way it could have been in kind of the heartland of America would have been if Eric Ramsey and Minnesota United ran the table, and then New York did what New York did. because Orlando would have hosted if LA. So this is the crazy dynamic. So Miami was supposed to have MLS Cup rights. When they get knocked out by Orlando, excuse me, by Atlanta United, then you're thinking, okay, it's going to be Cincinnati, it's going to be Columbus. They get dumped in round one as well, along with Miami. So you're like, hold on a second, Orlando City, then New York, and then Atlanta. Those are the hosting rights. But then those three are already out because Orlando City is the only one that can host if LAFC gets knocked out, if LA Galaxy get knocked out, if Seattle gets knocked out. And so all of a sudden you're thinking to yourself like, okay, well, like Orlando, good team. Is that going to draw the fan? So we think of it more of like television market size.
Yeah.
So anytime you have a Los Angeles team and a New York team in our sporting minds for television here in the States, you think of it, well, it doesn't matter if it's Boston Celtics against LA Lakers. It doesn't matter if it's Yankees against Dodgers. You know, you're going to get the eyeballs because these are big cities, big names, big teams. But this year's, listen, I think this is the perfect example this year of, while everything is super hyper driven, messy for obvious reasons, that this year I think really proves that you have two separate complete dynamics in Major League Soccer, which is the consistency of performance over the course of the regular season, which Inter Miami and Lionel Messi break the record, 73 points. It historically has never been matched. And now you think about the playoffs where it's about momentum. Like Real Salt Lake and Houston didn't lose in their first round of three matches, but both teams get knocked out in penalties. You know, Minnesota goes through, Seattle goes through. They didn't win games. You know, they beat teams in penalties. So it's a wild dynamic to think about it. It's very uniquely MLS. It's unapologetically MLS. And it's something that we've all kind of come to love. And as you kind of experience, and I know we'll talk about Sandro Sports and we'll talk about Red Bulls, that the dynamic there is that you have all of these, I don't know if we call them elite level, but really high level experience managers and players that have plied their trade over in Europe that then come over, and they've always kind of understood the playoff mentality of sports, but they've never experienced it in football and soccer in general. So now all of a sudden, let's use Sandro Schwartz as a perfect example, and almost like the anti-Jordi Alba that says, well, we weren't that good, and yet we made the playoffs, and now look at us. We're in an MLS Cup Final where Jordi Alba's saying, hold on a second, we were untouchable, we were excellent, we were record-breaking. Why do we deserve to get knocked out in the early round of the playoffs? That doesn't seem fair. So you've got like this unique dichotomy of an argument of what is the playoffs, and then how do you figure out how to win games in the important times of this elemental, I don't know, creation of sports that we see.
But people aren't put off that it's going to be coast v coast in the middle of the country. They're not put off by that.
I don't think so. I mean, I think more than anything, Cincinnati and Columbus were probably the two heavyweights in the Midwest that we expected to have a bigger role in the playoffs than happened. Yeah. But no, maybe egotistical. I'm not sure. But I grew up in LA, coming from a different perspective.
Just interesting to me. I don't know enough about America. It's all corn, as you know, to me, in the middle bit. I'm sure there's more than that. Corn and red hats is the whole thing. But on the subject of the artists formerly known as the Metro Stars, New York Red Bulls, I spoke to Daniel Edelman on a Sirius XM FC show just before the Hudson River Derby. Would have been 2 months ago during the regular season. They lost like 4 or 5-0. They got walloped in the game. And in the conversation we had then, there wasn't really a great deal. I mean, he's a very young man, right? But of course, all Americans are incredibly well media trained. He was a great kind of talker for someone who's 19 or whatever. But like, there was no sort of like, and what chance of winning the conference? What chance of MLS Cup? Where are this team now? It's sort of a bit like, we'll try and get through this game. And they'd been on a bit of a losing run and they lost the game 5-0. And at that point, they were sort of written off. I know that John Tolkien's going to be coming on Sirius XM FC on the Wednesdays. You set up the goal for Reyes in the conference final. I'm sure the conversation there is going to be very different. He's kind of a big character as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing
personality. That. Yeah.
Great personality. Lots of random hairstyles. Every time I see him, he looks completely different, which I always enjoy.
By the way, I got something for you. You can use this. I'll give you a little insight. So we were doing the game. Max and I were doing the game in Chicago last season. And Tolkien is an agitator. He loves it. He loves agitating the opponent and getting under his skin. Really good player, by the way. And whatever he was doing really pissed off the Chicago fans to the point where every time he was on the ball, they would boo the living piss out of him. And this was going on for the better part of like the second half, to the point where even when he's taking corner kicks, fans are throwing stuff at him, booing him. I mean, it was getting like aggressive. And from our perspective, we were just giggling, laughing on air. So he serves in a ball, they score, it ends up 1-1, game over. He's like celebrating the fans. We get him on the post game. I'm like, Johnny, what'd you do? He goes, I don't know what I did. I was like, what do you mean you don't know what I did? He goes, I just like tackled someone and the whole stadium just starts booing me. He goes, this sucks. My parents and my family are in the stands and they're just watching them boo me the whole time. And I was like, we were having a laugh about it, but he's such a good kid, man. He's got such a big, like boisterous personality. Extremely talented, young, dynamic left back, and we'll see how much longer he finds himself playing his trade in MLS.
But more broadly, I mean, what chance Red Bulls in this game? They're underdogs, right? Big time.
Big time underdogs, but I think obviously with Riqui Puig going down changes everything. You talked about two teams between Seattle and LA Galaxy that, it was really, really tight. Well, the reason why was Seattle was the best team in the league defensively. They're from Stephen Fry and Yeimar and Jackson Reagan, Nuhu Tolo, playing Christian Roldan. Obed Vargas is a superstar at 18 years old. He made the one-time switch from the United States to Mexico earlier in the summer, and I think that's going to be a huge loss in the future, not necessarily now, but in the future for the United States, because he was a part of the U.S. under-20s. I think with the Red Bulls, their press, their mentality, Carbajo and Edelman. Carbajo didn't play down in Orlando. He had picked up a knock. He and Edelman in the midfield are fantastic. Forsberg, Van Zier, Lewis Morgan having some assets coming off the bench. They're big, they're strong, they're gruff. Cornell in goal. I think they're, as much as people are going to tag them as the underdog, I don't think they're nearly as much of an underdog as people are trying to make them out to be at this point.
And you'll be doing the game for Sirius XM FC with Keith Costigan, Tony Miola. Mark Goss is going to be down there. Hey, I'm in The Sopranos. I've never seen it, but they based it on my life. Very niche joke for like 4 people, but we enjoyed it. And you're going to be live on Saturday across America. Pete will be there. Yeah, in between going to the gym, of course.
Well, here's the thing with Pete.
Next year.
Yeah, here's the thing with Pete. Last time we were together in January down in Miami, Pete made it extremely awkward because Pete's kind of a snooty, like, I'm a sommelier, like type wine guy, like doing that whole thing, which is totally, you all look like assholes. Sorry, Tim. Like, if you were that
trying to get the tannins, listen, and the flavors. No,
listen. Again, do it in the privacy of your own home. If you do it publicly, you're just an asshole. Sorry, Tim. I mean, we all know. Like, everybody, when you do that, if you're that person,
mate. I need this job. Don't
if you smell the cork and like you do the sifting and you do the smell before you take a drink and all that stuff, great. You're an asshole. Sorry, Tim. You look like an asshole. Sorry, Tim. I just want you to know that everybody in the restaurant, including the people at your table, think you're an asshole. Sorry, Tim. So Pete did that. Everything was fine. He ordered another glass. He convinced himself that it wasn't the same wine that he was drinking earlier, sent it back. I thought for sure the guy was going to stuff his French toast into his pants and then add him a little bit of powdered sugar afterwards. And then literally the guy goes, oh, okay, cool. This isn't yours. Literally treated him like an asshole, brought the bottle. He goes, I'm going to go grab that bottle right there. Okay. Just keep an eye on it. Grabs the bottle, brings it over, opens the bottle. It's the same bottle. He does it again. He goes, this is great. He goes, it's the same bottle. I literally was the same bottle. So Pete was the asshole. Sorry, Tim. And it was so uncomfortable. Miola and Marcos and we were uncomfortable for the server, for the maitre d'. We were uncomfortable for ourselves. And then we just thought Pete looked like an asshole. Sorry, Tim. So I just want you to know, don't do that. Just stop doing it.
Don't do it.
Order the wine. It's fine. If it tastes like shit, sorry, Tim, send it back. But don't do this. It's the smelly, stiffy, all that stuff. You look like a dick. Sorry, Tim.
Yeah.
And we all have friends that are dicks. Sorry, Tim.
So much vaping.
Just don't be the
vaping.
Sorry, Tim.
So much beeping. Listen, we haven't got a great deal of time for heroes and villains this week, so we thought we could do a hero or villain. So give us your hero or villain of the week.
So I'm going to combine mine because I saw two electric post-game interviews, and it was Michael Elise for Bayern Munich, and it was Joshua Zirkzee for Manchester United. Fun little fact out there for you in radio land and podcast land and watching us on Spotify or YouTube. Don't ever waste your time watching either of those two in an interview format. It is by far the most uncomfortable, horrific 2 minutes that you will ever spend in your life.
Who was the other one? Elise and who? Who was the other one?
Elise and Zirkzee, Joshua Zirkzee. Just let me help you out. Let me be Uncle Dunny here for a second. Just don't do it. Just don't waste your time, because those guys never want to do an interview ever again. And it is so awkwardly apparent that they don't like it. Like, let's just stop talking to them. Yeah. Just let them be footballers, because the interview process, it's ugly. It's uncomfortable. It makes you have anxiety just watching the poor interviewer trying to interview either Elise and Zirkzee. So it's more of like I don't know if it's heroes or villains, but more of like a public service announcement for all of you guys out there. Just don't waste your time. It's not worth it. Just move on. Click through.
I quite
scroll.
like this. I quite like this new thing of like some players who don't want to do interviews just like do it so bad, like Cole Palmer. There was another one this weekend.
Ruben Diaz did it. Ruben Diaz did it. Where it's just
it was
for no reason. Sorry, Tim. Like, if you don't want to be there, don't be there. Don't even walk up there.
They are contractually obliged, some of them, to talk. But
we're just looking forward to our next game.
Yeah,
can't wait to play Forest. Well, what went wrong today? We're just looking forward to our next game. Can't wait to play Nottingham Forest. Like, don't do that. Like, the guy's got a job to do. Like, yeah, but also
I just feel like in every group that I would love to be interviewed. I'd be happy to be interviewed after every game, even if we lost 7-0. I'd be happy to do it. You get the sense someone like Declan Rice loves being interviewed.
Yeah,
but there are others
James
who are
Maddison
just like
loves it.
Madison loves it. So just have, like, in the same way you have a captain and a corner taker and a penalty taker, have the interview guy. And there's 3 guys that do the interviews, and you rotate those 3 people. They are your official, like, White House spokespeople. Like, have that, you know? But don't lie. Anyway, don't lie. Don't lie. Don't lie.
By the way, just another service announcement. For those that watch the players step in front of the camera after a terrible result, those are salt of the earth human beings. Those are the good people. Because it's so easy when you score a goal or you get a shutout or you break a record or you've won a game to those people. That's just they're there to celebrate themselves. The people that go on camera after a game that then can verbalize in a realistic way what just happened without getting angry and understanding they're pissed off about the result, but then like step up. Those are leaders. Those are captains. Those are the I just want you to remember, those are the people inside of the team in the locker room that are the absolute most trustworthy leaders in that group. It's the ones that only do the press conferences when you score goals and you win. Those are the guys that are just there for the pomp and circumstance.
As we're doing personal pet peeves on post-match interviews, if you are doing a post-match interview, I always stay on the side of the interviewer, as you know, because I get very touchy about this, but please stop asking players and managers how they feel and what their emotions are. Like, f*** off. Sorry, Tim. Like, ask them about the football match. Like, first question should always be, give us your thoughts on the football match, which they will do. And then if you've got 3 questions, the next 2 are incident A and incident B. Talk about the football, because these guys live and breathe the football. And what are your emotions after that game? What was your emotions about this? Are you happy about this? It's like, they don't want to talk about their emotions. They want to talk about the football that they're obsessed with and the match and what happened in the match. Watch the match, have an opinion on the match, and ask them a question about the match. Honestly, they'll love you for it. They will love you for it, because that's what they want to talk about. So just stop asking about their emotions. Can you tell me how you feel? How do you feel? How do you feel? I hate when people ask me how I feel at all times, let alone on television. Stop asking me how I feel. Don't ask them how they feel.
How do you feel about Christmas?
So I also have a combined hero and villain this week that I just wanted to bring you because I love this story and we're not going to have time for it. Wolves against Bournemouth. which was a clusterfuck, sorry, Tim, for Wolves of the highest order. Jose Sarr putting in an all-time bad goalkeeping performance. Justin Kluivert scored 3 penalties in this game. 2 in the opening 18 minutes. The first player in 67 years to score a hat-trick of penalties in an English top-flight game. And the first person, obviously, in Premier League history. That league has only existed for like 30 years or so. But it's the third penalty where my hero and villain emerge. The hero is Justin Kluivert for scoring that third penalty because it's, not easy to score a penalty at the best of times, let alone 3, and it's 3-2 at that moment. Wolves are on top. Could have gone either way. Watch it again, the penalty, after you've listened to this podcast, and look to the crowd just behind the goal. There is a man. He is clearly a local from Wolverhampton in the hardcore end. And what do you do when you're behind the goal at a penalty? You do a bit of this, you wave your arms, you flick the V's, you do all that. Well, this guy took it to a higher standard. So first thing he does, whip off the old top. Second thing he does, whip off the T-shirt underneath, display the incredible man boobs of a middle-aged gentleman. But that's not enough for our pal from Wolverhampton. No. He then pulls down what you would say are the pants. I would say the trousers to reveal some very tight Marks and Spencer, because he's from Britain, green Y fronts. And he's standing up. It's about 45, this geezer, I'd suggest. He's a bald, God bless him. And he's doing his belly. He's wiggling the old tadger. He's trying to put off Justin Kluivert in any way that he can. Justin Kluivert converts the penalty. It doesn't work. And then the next bit is just so great because we've all been there when we've done something stupid in front of our friends. He sat down, he turns around to his mate and he goes, well, that didn't fucking work, did it?
I'm literally, as you're talking about this, I'm trying to go find it.
It's so good.
I have to go find it.
It's so good. Sorry, Tim, for the last bit, but it just is excellent. It didn't work. And his two mates are like, John, you knob. Just
legend.
Amazing. All of it is spectacular, and you've got to go and check it out. Listen, we are out of time on today's Week in the Tackle. My thanks, as ever, to Brian Dunny Dunseth. Have a great time in Los Angeles. I'm sure it'll be very much like when you walk through Columbus, Ohio, as the mayor. It's probably the same for you on, like, Venice Beach or something. You'll be there pumping some iron. I don't know. Have a good trip. No? You're watching it? Have you got it?
The best is his mate is pointing at his banana hammock. Going, it's right there. It's right there. Look at his banana hammock. It's right there. Oh, so that's good. Brilliant.
I can't believe you hadn't seen it. It's so good. Dunny, thank you. I'm Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced the program. We'll see you next week.
See ya.